Good afternoon, and welcome to the Thurston County Budget Amendment discussion for 2 hours. And by way of, this is June 3rd, 2020. And I'm Commissioner John Hutchings, the chair of the board. And we also have Vice Chair Commissioner Menser and Commissioner Gary Edwards in the house. And we have our budget. I'm going to start with the County Manager, Romero Chavez, and the Budget Manager and Assistant County Manager, Robin Campbell, and we have Denise Doty in the house, and Olivia Odman. Welcome. And is there anybody I'm missing that I don't see?
Patty Risotto.
Who is it? Heidi?
Patty Risotto.
Oh, Patty. Okay, hi, Patty. Now, if you want, the public, if you want to listen in, you can dial 360. We are set up for the conference call?
Yes, sir.
Okay, 360-252-9020, and your PIN is 1234, and you can listen in. So with that, I'm taking the paper clip off this paperwork and turning to Romero to start this off.
Commissioners, and this is going to be Robin's briefing as well as her staff, but this is a yearly event in a way. This is a budget amendment that you will see as you have considered budget amendments in the past. We, out of the biennial budget, wanted to reduce the number of budget amendments. When we used to have a yearly budgets, we used to have 4 a year budget amendments. We have been able to reduce. Unfortunately, this year, we're going to have to do extra work related to the emergency, but this proposal or this information before you is not related to the budget adjustments that you are currently considering with the offices and departments.
Okay.
So as Romero said, we do budget amendments on a regular basis throughout the biennium. A few years back, we went from 4, we used to do them every quarter. We reduced that to 3. We've cut that back to 2. So this is the 3rd amendment in this biennial budget. And we've been trying to do them in the spring and then right at the end of the year. But as Romero said, this year is going to be a little extra because of the crisis. This is, again, these items that you're going to review today, for the most part, are not related to the economic downturn and the budget decisions that you're making to reduce the budget. These are normal amendments that we were already in the process before COVID-19 business. I'm going to try to work through the first 5 pages quickly. Most of them should be pretty easy. I know that you're going to want to spend a little more time when we get to revenues and the operating policy decisions. They should be in order in your packet, and I'm just going to jump right in if you all are ready to go.
I am.
So the first item is grants, and I'm going to share my screen. For the viewing public, these documents are available. Oh, Romero, you got to make me the host. So for people who are, thank you, got it. These items are all on our website if you'd like to follow along. And then we'll also have them on the screen. The first set of requests are grants. Basically what these are new grants that we did not anticipate at the time we did the midterm adjustment for the biennium. And all of these grants have revenue that is at least as much as the anticipated expenditure. If we look at the bottom of page 3, you see the summary. The general fund revenue is increasing by $944,000. The expenditures increased by $861,000 roughly. Other funds are increasing by 2.6 million in revenue and 2.4 million in expenditures. The items that are highlighted in this peach color are revenues that are specifically related to COVID-19 response. These grants are limited in their scope, which means that they can only be used for very specific purposes. I don't think, unless you would like to go through line item by line item, I don't think that you need to review every grant. What is the pleasure of the board?
I do not need it, but I'll ask my seatmates if they need the grant information.
I'll
Time,
read it. I'll read it myself. I don't need to go through it.
Gary? Gary, okay?
Yes, it's okay
Okay.
to move forward. And again, you're not making final decisions today, commissioners, just
Right.
to be clear.
Okay, so
Right.
let's move on then, Rob, that's good.
Okay, cool. Grant. I'm going to bring up the second document now, which is capital policy. And share my screen again. So the capital policy items are items that offices and departments have brought to you on capital projects that were not included in the original budget. They are on the list that you recently reviewed when you looked at all of the capital projects being worked on by Public Works. All of these items are from Public Works. They are being paid out of storm and surface water funds for the Boston Harbor Road project. It's a stormwater conveyance project. The Woodard Creek stormwater retrofit, and the solid waste utility flare station. The first two are from storm and surface water capital funds. The solid waste utility flare station is from the solid waste reserve. The next two items are parks and trails, and it is a single item, but what you see here are the two different funds that are impacted because there is a transfer of revenue or money from the impact fees into the parks fund because they do their work out of the main fund. And this is all for the Deschutes Falls Parkway Walkway and Viewpoint Improvement Project. So these are capital projects. You've seen them all before. And would you like any additional information on any of them?
Yeah, Commissioner Menser, go ahead.
So number 3, the flare station. I remember this project, but it says expenditure change. It's got the 211 in parentheses, which usually means like the reverse. And then in the narrative, it says they need an additional 766,000. So what is the actual economic impact here, or financial impact of what's going on?
What it shows in here, Commissioner, is they're reducing the expenditure this year and most likely will deliver the project next year.
So we'll need to give them more money next year, but for this year, they want to reduce the expenditure line item.
Yeah, because they may not be able to spend that this year.
Commissioner Edwards, do you have anything?
Yeah, I guess my question would be they're not gonna be able to because of, I'm just curious we got it set aside, the staff,
And
COVID, what's going on? I remember Commissioner Zeta from, the Port of Olympia, discussing this issue, something to do with the flare enhancement, trying to get, some power generation going. And I'm curious what's going on here with that, so I do have.
We don't have any information right now about why the delay, and we can certainly
Yeah.
get that and get it back to you.
And would the SWAC committee be having any input on this? That's my question.
Well, not necessarily, because there's operational aspects of the business, and what we bring to the SWAT committee is more high-level overview of policy.
Okay, but there's more to come on this yet. We're not making any decisions today, right?
And I hate to say this, but let me take you back to last year. That's when the department provided you with a series of projects they're planning to do at the work, as well as the other satellite facilities, and this is one of those projects. The delay has been because I believe is perhaps lack of resources to move on, and maybe just have an understanding of what is it that we need to do, just to make sure we have a clear project.
Okay, and then does this show a reduction in our solid waste reserve then, or a dedication of fundings? What's the deal there?
Overall, they're going to need an increase for the project.
But most likely you will see that on your 2021, 2022 budget.
Right.
Okay.
So, I have a question on, number 4 and 5, the, Parks and Trails, Deschutes Falls Park. They're the same, with the exception of number 4, of course, shows the revenue change and the expenditure change. So my first question is, the additional funding are paid for from parks impact fees. What are we bringing in park impact fees, and what's the balance of that account?
Oh, it has a substantial balance.
Substantial?
Yes.
Okay. Are you looking that up, Olivia? Okay. So my next question though is, the number 5 though just shows an expenditure. Is that what the amendment's for, or what?
So
Because
the
they're identical.
expenditure on line 5 becomes the revenue on line 4 because it's a transfer between funds.
Okay. Yeah, because I see 4, it was a revenue
Right.
and an expenditure change.
Right. So they move money out of the impact fees, so it's an expense to that fund and becomes a revenue in the
Oh.
Parks and Trails fund, and then they spend the money on the project out of the Parks and Trail fund.
Okay.
Transfers.
And but it's also coming from REIT too, and the impact. Park impact
Some
fees.
of the price of the overall project will be from REIT, but this part of the project is from the impact fees.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else on capital? Oh,
And I don't need to have the balance of the park impact fund. I don't need the fees. I don't have to have that. Thank you.
anything else? Good. Is everybody good on the capital?
Yep, thumbs up.
Yes. All right, great. I should mention, and I should have mentioned this at the very beginning, you're not making any decisions today. We're looking to you for what questions do we need to get answered and any guidance you'd like to give us. But we will be asking you to adopt the amendment as you see fit on June 16th. And we've already published that date. The budget amendment does not require a public hearing, but it does require public notice, and we've made that notice. So we're working for adoption on June 16th.
Okay.
The next item is the technical worksheet. And really, these are just technical changes and transfers between funds. Again, if you look at the bottom line, here on page 2, the increase in the general fund in expenditure and revenue are exactly the same, and I think those are all copy leases. There are a few grant reductions where there's equal expenditure reduction that goes with the revenue. So the impact expenditures and revenues are exactly the same. In the other funds, there is a decrease in revenue of 313,000 and expenditures are only going down by 173,000. These are mainly items where a grant was being reduced, or we didn't pick up something in the original appropriation. Something was booked that didn't need to be there. These are all just technical changes. They're putting things in proper codes. The items on pages 2 and 3 that begin here, this really long list, is the fund balance amendment. You will recall that every year after we close the fiscal year, we adjust beginning fund balance that's in the Munis system for every single fund. So this list is the change to the fund balance for every fund. And again, there's really not an impact, a significant impact on any one fund. So unless you want to go item by item, I would recommend that we not spend a lot of time on these.
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
I'm not necessarily interested in item by item, but under the beginning fund balance of general fund, it shows 10 million, 10.5, okay?
Right.
I thought that we had an ending fund balance of more than that. I don't have the number, but it was considerably more, I thought, towards the end of last year. What
So
happened?
this is just the change, Commissioner Edwards, and if you think back, the projected ending fund balance was a little over 10 million. The actual ending fund balance is a little over 20 million. The bulk of that change is the
Okay, that's the
booking of
change.
the revenue accruals. So this is only the amount of the change.
Oh, okay.
Is this for 1 year?
Yes.
And that,
So if you go through all the funds and you ask about the solid waste fund, you find it on page number 3, just as an example. You have the reserves of 2.3,
yes.
right? That's not the total and the
That's,
balance.
but that's the
change.
difference
That's the change.
from what it was.
Right.
Where do we find the actual amount? I mean, I realize it, but when we don't have it on the same sheet, it makes it a nightmare to look it up. Wouldn't it be just as simple to have the amount and the change? I mean, just so we had a better understanding.
We can bring that. Yeah.
Is that
We have a
possible?
document. Absolutely, we have a document that we can send you.
That will parallel this document, basically. I mean,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can make sure
Got
the
how much
change
we
and
had
the total,
estimate.
right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
It's got the beginning estimate, it's got the actual and the difference.
I just think that would be more helpful as we're trying to differentiate what we're gonna do with what, that's all.
Great,
Good point. Okay.
Robin,
yes.
I thought, looking at the same list, I thought Conservation Futures brought in about 1.4 million. So how do we get 2 million in there this year?
again, this is the adjustment to the projection for the ending fund balance. The ending fund balance in conservation futures, I think, is about 6 million. And we've had conversations about how offices and departments do not spend their entire appropriation. Even when we think they will, they don't. So we projected a fund balance that was about $2 million less than it actually is. And that's probably a combination of sales tax coming in much stronger than we had projected and offices and departments not spending their entire appropriation.
And also some grants may not spend the awarded amounts in the past year, so, and that's what the adjustment also includes.
In TST.
No, I'm talking about conservation future.
Conservation future.
Conservation, yeah, conservation.
I think I could give an example. We've made awards to groups to make a purchase, for an example, and then that purchase fell through.
Yeah, or they have not been able to do the appraisal, or they have
Something,
not been
yeah,
able to
yeah.
conclude the expenditure. So, and then that becomes part of the ending fund balance.
Right,
Okay,
because
so
they
it's-
didn't spend.
Something beyond the tax revenue that's coming in.
Right.
Yeah, it's not necessarily money that's coming in. It's more that we're not spending as much as we thought we would.
Okay. I'm good with this sheet.
Okay? Am I getting,
I just as a sideline, I mean, like treatment sales tax, that probably is a little of both.
yes,
Okay.
that's what I was talking about earlier, was the TST money.
But also you see some reductions on the ending fund balance.
Yes.
In some funds like the family court services. And those are in parentheses, so.
Right. And that one, the revenue did not come in as much as had been anticipated. It really all depends on, how good was your initial estimate. One of the things you need to remember is we estimate the beginning fund balance in like July, 6 months before the end of the year. And then you've got an extra 2 months to close the fiscal year. So a lot of things can happen in those 8 months.
Okay.
All right.
So, okay, just maybe one more point before we go. So at our next get-together with budget, we would have this, basically the same information with another column to show the reality of what the fund is.
So commissioners, I'm not going to change this particular report. This is generated out of our budget system. But I will make sure that you have a separate report that shows these numbers along with the beginning and ending fund balance so you can see what the adjustment is on.
And will that be in the same order?
It is listed in the order of funds in fund order. Yes, we can make sure it's in that order.
Okay, thank you.
Olivia saying yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just sent it to Ramiro and Robin, so for them to look at and they'll forward. So
Okay,
everything's
thank you.
really easy to follow. I just kind of ticked it down with my finger really quick.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Operating carry forward.
Yep. Carry forward is, I stopped sharing to do this. Carry forward is projects that began last year and didn't get finished, or they didn't get as far along as the office or department had hoped, and they now need spending authority to finish the project this year. So even though these are all expenditures, the revenue's already in the bank. The first two items are general fund. And I think that, no, not both of them. Both of them are from grant awards that were received at the end of the year last year. The first is for Target Zero, and the grant was from State Farm Insurance Company for traffic safety. The second item is the Sheriff Law Enforcement. They receive funds right at the end of the year every year from the Nisqually. So the money comes in before you have, so late that we don't have time to spend it. And they're asking for the additional authority to spend this year. All of the rest of these items are in other funds, not general fund. So we have again, line 3 is the Victim Advocate Program, also received a donation from the Nisqually tribe. Emergency Management needs to purchase their incident trailer. This was approved last year, but it did not get received by the county by the end of the year, so we could not pay for it last year. It will be coming in this year. In roads, in public works, there's the Rural Community Support Program. It is continuing this year, and the funding is through the regional TRPC. And then we have the road fund professional services, where there are a number of large projects that are coming over into this year. Several of them had been delayed, but they're moving forward now. Page 2 continues with parks and trail projects. And some of these come with revenue that had not been booked last year, so they're bringing the revenue forward as well as the expense. Then you have historic preservation. These grants have been committed to these projects, but again, the projects were not completed. Road projects make up lines 10, 11, and 12. Line 13 is for the parks impact fee study that was not completed last year. And then the list just goes on. The bulk of what's on pages 3, 4, and 5 are the utilities. So projects that support our water and sewer utilities. Again, approved last year, but not completed last year. And then the last item is a large dollar amount, $2.3 million in ER&R for equipment that the board approved last year, but had not been purchased yet. And the entire amount is coming out of the ER&R fund. And again, the equipment had been ordered, but that it had not been received by December 31st. So that's a quick look at carry forward.
Yeah, just give us a moment here.
Yep.
No problem, thank you. Do my seatmates have any questions? Nope, okay. All right, Robin, press on, please.
All right.
No,
Let's see if I can open the TST. These are items that we've talked to you about, where the treatment sales tax fund, the most of these items are a shift out of the general fund into TST to cover indirect costs that should be charged to the TST fund. This is all part of cost allocation. Most of it is a technical move. It's to meet the fair and equitable requirements of state law and federal laws to distribute your indirect and overhead costs in a fair and equitable manner. The items that are not part of the indirect is item number 4. The prosecuting attorney's office has determined that the amount that they had estimated to be spent on TST was higher than what they'll actually be spending. So they're actually asking for an increase in general fund and a decrease in TST for the prosecutor's office.
So is that tied to number 12?
That is, yes. Yeah, that's the flip side of that transaction.
Okay.
At the bottom line, however, it nets to zero, $344,000 reduction to expenses in the general fund. And you may recall that as you were reviewing budget reductions, we recommended that you take this change and count it toward the budget reduction savings. So you've basically already given guidance to staff that we would accept these changes as part of the budget reductions for this year. This just gives you the details behind it.
Commissioner Edwards has a question.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
On that particular fund where we're going to make an expend on prosecuting attorney on 4 and I guess 12, are we going to be taking money out of the general fund to augment what we're not taking out of the treatment sales tax?
Yes.
And why are we doing that? Is that because we end up, treatment sales tax, we have a surplus, if you will, in that fund, and we never seem to have enough in general fund. So why would we make that adjustment?
Well, the prosecuting attorney has determined that they will not incur eligible costs of $30,000. So the reduction in treatment sales tax, since they're not incurring eligible cost, we could not charge that $30,000 to TST. Now, the flip side of the transaction where the prosecutor is saying, give me general fund to make up for this loss of TST funding, that is a decision that's up to the board to make. Otherwise, it would reduce the overall budget for the prosecutor by $30,000.
Okay, but right off the top, you don't really know, I mean, why he changed that. I mean, other than it's maybe something to do with the legalities of using that money in a certain fashion. I mean, I just hate to see us draw down our general fund when we don't have enough money in the general fund and put money back in the treatment sales tax when we already have money in there. So it just doesn't make sense to me.
So, you know, Commissioner, I can't speak to exactly why they think they're going to spend less now. It could be, I can't even speculate. So that is a question that we can ask the prosecutor.
Go ahead, Ty.
Can I get clarification on the treatment sales tax? I mean, Commissioner Edwards said a couple of times that there's money in there, and I'm just wondering, why would there be money in there? We've got massive need for drug treatment. We're constantly talking about it. I thought we allocated all that money that comes in through a ranking process, et cetera. Why would there be extra money in TST?
So there's a fairly significant fund balance in TST, and there is, as we were saying earlier, offices and departments do not tend to spend their full appropriation. So even though we've got an aggressive and a huge need for those types of funds, and we do rank and prioritize them, and the board funds these projects, not all the money gets spent. So the fund balance has not been going down. There is a significant fund balance in TST. Now it's going to come down because of the impact of COVID, and it is a sales tax. So for this year and next year, we're going to collect less than we otherwise would have, but there is still a fund balance surplus.
But to go to Commissioner Menser's point, and let you know, Ty, that the prosecutor and defense, and I think some of the other departments or offices are using considerably more TST money now than they have been before we came into office, because there are things that qualified for TST funding that weren't even put in for it. And so that changed within the last 3 years. So they are getting more TST money for their programs. But still a considerable fund balance, very healthy.
So just as an example, let's say the county commissioners allocated through the process, some amount of money, I don't know, $1 million for drug court. And you're saying that the drug court then got a grant of $1 million, but they didn't spend all of that. So it's still sitting in there.
That is exactly correct.
Okay, so we could potentially, in a non-COVID-19 world, we could sit there and look at programs that are underspending and potentially allocate a portion of that money to other programs so we get more treatment. Like, for example, there's a need for direct treatment in the jail for substance abuse treatment. That's been under-resourced. So that's a potential. Okay.
Yes, and the board has done that. One of the ways you addressed part of the concerns of the Justice Project, the Northwest Justice, was to add treatment funding from TST in the jail. So that is absolutely available to you.
But we have a capacity for more.
I would have the conversation with Carrie Hennon. That committee is currently working on the proposals for next biennium, and I'm sure that you will see increases. Part of the concern, of course, is the reduction in the capacity of the BHO, and TST is seen as one possible source to make up for some of those losses.
Okay.
Commissioner Edwards has a question.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I guess I would try to pique Commissioner Menser's interest on a topic I know that he's concerned about. Maybe we can have a future conversation. And that is with our homeless population. I think all of us know that a big piece of that problem is mental health and addiction problems. I'm not aware of any success story that I can point to where we actually utilized some of this money that we might be able to utilize to help get some of these individuals out of that rut that they're in, whether it be mental health or addiction, and see if we can't fix some of these people and get them back into being productive members of society. I actually think that would be a conversation worth having if we could put something together to try and alleviate the problem we're faced with on that.
And with the TST Advisory Committee doing that work, now then potentially some of these organizations could, if they have the capacity to provide those services, they would be able to utilize more money. But many of them don't have the capacity to do that as much as they would like to. But it's a great conversation to have if we have that funding. But then again, bumping into the BHO or the ASO, I'm not sure how that's going to work out.
And you will have plenty of opportunity to discuss the TST later after the advisory committee provides recommendations for you. And obviously, those are recommendations. You have the latitude to fund them or not.
Okay.
All right. We good on the TST?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. The next item is revenue. There are only 2 items on this page, but we thought it was important to have them separate from everything else. These are technical adjustments, but you need to be aware that it is a 100,000 reduction in the anticipated revenue in the general fund. The first item is from Superior Court. What they did was they had found that in 2018 there was a line item added for a specific purpose that when the revenue came in, it was booked under a different code, still in the general fund. The revenue still came to the general fund. So they also booked revenue in the second code. So now they need to reduce their revenue by $93,000 because basically it was double counted. I want to say that that was under a prior finance officer, and this was discovered by their new finance officer. So they found it. They're making this correction, and that is a very good thing. The second item is in juvenile court. They had been reimbursed $7,800 each year for UA testing, and the program has been eliminated, so they no longer have that revenue source.
Okay.
Any questions about these changes?
Is that coming from the state?
No, go ahead, Commissioner.
The UI program, I think that's a state grant. Olivia would need to look at the coding, and she's nodding. Yes, it was a state award.
Okay, thanks.
No, hang on.
Oh, maybe she's looking at
I'm
it.
nodding. Let me look really quick.
All right.
I'll get back to
Go
you.
down. Okay.
Trying to stay muted.
Gary, do you have a question?
Does that $100,000 affect our ending fund balance
Yes.
Mhm.
detrimentally, I take it?
Yes.
It's a reduction.
When was the that 93,000? When was that discovered? Last year?
Within the last few months, it
Last
was.
couple months?
Yeah. So you know that they have recently had Georgia. She had only been the finance person for juvenile court, but now she has all of Superior Court. She discovered this in one of her initial reviews. So, and I think she was just appointed in the last couple of months.
Good grief. Okay. All right.
And this has been an accumulative effort, a cumulative amount probably over a period of years, is that right?
No, it was booked as 93,000 this year. This is not an accumulation.
Are
This
we
is
gonna have to
not
go
like the
back
write-offs
and, are we gonna have to go back and adjust things for prior years?
No.
I'd like to know a little more about this myself at some point, not today maybe, but.
What would you like to know?
Well, I'm kind of curious how, you lose track of $100,000. It always makes me curious, that's all. I'd like to know a little more about it, how in 1 year. I commend her for finding it. But we've had several of these instances where we ended up with a shortfall. And in this case, it probably affects our ending fund balance. I'd just like to know a little more about what it was. It's not much of an explanation.
If I could just elaborate, when I was talking to Georgia about it, it's more or less that when it was booked in 2018, they booked it in revenue. And when the actual revenue came in, they had reached out to, I think, financial services, and Georgia had figured out, it really should be this other revenue number. And at the time, with the changing of staff numbers, once they booked it in a new revenue number and that number didn't have budget, it triggered, okay, well, I need to increase the budget over there. And without the other person there saying, hey, there was actually already budget booked in a different revenue number, we should have just shifted it got put in again. So it's just really hard when you've got two different people. So it was more or less putting in the correct coding and then doing the correct budget. And it's just unfortunate at the time that they corrected the budget, corrected the coding, that they just didn't know that someone else had booked the revenue incorrectly.
So they booked the revenue twice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what it was.
Yeah. So we didn't lose track of it. It was just booked twice.
And that other revenue, 7,800, that's not a grant revenue. It's a 34 number. It's just juvenile services. It's not a grant.
Where would the revenue be coming from?
On the 93,000,
No, there's 78.
No,
Oh,
the
78.
78,000.
93 must have been general fund, yeah,
They're both general funds.
Oh,
So
okay.
the
They both have an
78,
impact on the general fund.
yeah,
right.
I was
okay.
just asking reimbursement for your analysis from where? Who is reimbursing?
Right.
Another fund or the state, some state program? It said program has been eliminated. Well, obviously we didn't do that.
Right. Otherwise, the expenditures would go down too. So we'll find out who that money was coming from.
It does say that juvenile court will continue to provide testing for juveniles on probation per court order. So that's why their expenses didn't go down, just the funding went away. But we'll get back to you.
Thank you.
All right.
Are you satisfied with number one?
Yeah,
Are we ready to move to the policy? This is the one that's gonna
Yeah,
take the most time.
it looks like we are, yeah.
All right.
So this is the meat and potatoes of the conversation, commissioners.
here it
Yeah.
comes, here it comes.
Now the rest
Here it
of those
comes.
out of the way.
That was the Caesar salad right there.
Yeah, that was just the green salad with no dressing.
Yeah,
All right. So this one I am going to go line by line so you can have an opportunity to ask questions about each one. The first item, the first, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 pages. The first 4 pages are all general fund. I'm looking for my glasses so I'll be able to read this.
Yeah, that is correct.
So item number 1 on line 1 is the increased cost of the audit. The state examiner has told us that this year our audit is going to cost $35,000 more than we had budgeted. The county does not have an option to pay, and we pay them out of a specific department that is set up solely for payment to the state auditor. So it's $35,000 more than we thought it would be. So to get through this list, I'm going to keep going and I'll pause after each one. But if you don't jump in, I'm going to keep going. Does that work for all of you?
fair enough.
Okay. So item number 2 is from the prosecuting attorney. There were increases bargained in the union contract for extra pay, and the prosecutor is asking for $36,442 to cover the cost of the extra pay. The next item, line 3, also from the prosecuting attorney's office.
Thank you, Robin. Okay, now I'm going to back up.
Okay, good.
Does that mean then for the prosecuting attorney or for any others coming up, because we're just starting fresh on this operating policy, would that have been when it was negotiated that he would have been expected or we would have asked that he absorb that cost? And I'm not talking about him specifically. There's going to be, I'm sure, others in here. And if they said they would absorb the cost, and now they're coming back to ask, will we know that?
That is a question that I would need to ask Debbie Brookman, our union negotiator.
Okay.
So I don't have an answer for that, but I can certainly get that information for you.
And it makes sense. My question makes sense.
Yes, absolutely does.
Thank you.
Because I know that I get asked during negotiations if there are costs that I can absorb. So yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
And I'm not singling out the prosecuting attorney. There may be several others in here the same.
There
boat.
will be other items on this list that are due to contract negotiation.
And Robin, we've approved these contracts already, right?
Yes, the labor agreements are approved, but the budget impact has not been. The impact of the budget to the offices and departments was not they weren't included in the budget because the labor contracts were finalized after the budget was passed.
It's only one contract outstanding. And that is the contract with the administrative staff and the sheriff's office. But the board agreed on an MOU just for 2020. So,
Well, just so I'm clear how this works, just so I can, because my questions were connected to Commissioner Hutchings, and I just want to make sure I get it. That would you have, you meaning all of us, I guess, would the board have projected into the budget a cost of living or a guesstimation of what a contract increase might be, and then this is on top of that, or do we just keep everything flat and then we have to kind of deal with it once we see what the contract is?
We do try to project into the budget the impacts of the labor negotiations. We build in a COLA, we build in the medical expenses that we think are going to change, but we don't build everything in because we don't know what all it could be. In the future, you might consider having us build in just a pot of money for upcoming contract changes. But we don't do that now.
And is this I guess the same question Hutch had, but is it normal that we would see this kind of a request each time a contract is finished and it goes a little above what was built in? I mean, is this a normal standard request, or is this something unusual?
So I'm hesitating because the answer is kind of, it depends. Sometimes Debbie calls and asks, can you absorb this cost? And if the answer to that is yes, I'll absorb it, then we should not be seeing these changes come through. And then some offices may not have been asked to absorb, but do not come forward to ask for an increase.
So it's all over the place, sounds like. You'll
Yeah.
tell us in what the situation was with this particular one later.
Yes.
Well, that was exactly my question. We shouldn't see this if we were told they were going to absorb it, or if they said they would absorb the cost. We shouldn't be seeing it.
That's correct.
I'm not singling anybody out. I just need to have that sorted out in my head as we go through the list.
Same with me. Thanks.
All right. Okay. So moving on to item number 3. This is not due to a union contract. This one is because the amount of money that the prosecutor estimated they would spend on involuntary commitment services that would be reimbursed by the BHO, the estimate was higher than their actual cost that they will be able to charge to the BHO. So what if I'm understanding this correctly, the revenue from the BHO will be decreased by $49,000, and the prosecutor is going to redirect the time of that attorney to general fund activities. So they're asking to continue to pay for this out of general fund, and it would impact the general fund balance.
but although that we see a reduction on the revenue, where do we see the increase on the general fund?
So they already have appropriation for the general fund.
Okay, so what
and
they're
they
saying
do
is,
continue to spend, but we don't get the revenue in.
so perhaps what this line item says is the revenue is not coming in, they're shifting those activities to the general fund, and the current allocation for the prosecutor's office can cover those activities.
Right, because they've got appropriation.
Right.
But if you think about the conversations that we had with the courts and the BHO and the clerk and the prosecutor and public defense, there was a commitment made to hire additional FTEs that would be covered by the BHO. And now they've got those FTEs and the full cost will not be covered by the BHO because the things that those attorneys are working on are not related to involuntary commitment. The board authorized FTEs because you thought there would be revenue, and now there's not. And this is not, and again, not to pick on the prosecutor at all, but this is a policy decision for the board because the real question is, are you going to continue to pay for costs of programs? And that might be services, it might be staff, when the revenue that was paying for those things end.
Right, and just for anybody watching, the reason that the BHO or the money is not there to support these positions that we authorized, assuming that that payment would be there, that money would be there, that's as a result of the state.
It's possible. It's also possible that the estimated amount of time it would take to work on these cases was less, because it's my understanding that if we incur costs related to involuntary commitment, that we must be paid for those costs by state law.
So there was an overshoot on estimate of manpower. Is that maybe what happened?
That is my understanding, yes.
Oh, okay.
So, Robin, do you know, does he bill that out hourly or does he bill it out by a portion of an FTE? How does that work?
They should be tracking their time and billing based on actual time spent.
Activity and hourly spent.
So it would be an hourly rate.
Basically, yes.
And so we still have these employees, they're just reassigned to other work and not ITA.
Correct.
Okay.
So is that a half of an FTE almost then? Is that what we're talking about?
50,000.
50,000?
Yeah.
Roughly, maybe
Yeah.
a third to a half.
Okay.
So
All right.
he's gaining a half of an FTE basically.
Basically to work on other things.
Yeah, okay.
But I mean, that's just for a period of time. I'm not sure exactly what we're covering here. 2020, we're trying to make an adjustment. I mean, I guess I'm wondering is, you know, the ITA workflow with the pandemic could go up, could go down. He could need that person in 6 months or need even less people. I mean, isn't this somewhat fluid situation?
I would have to dig a little deeper to find an answer to that.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess my only I understand the nature of this business. I guess my only question is this $49,000 of expected is over what period of time?
It's my understanding that that's over the entire year,
2020.
2020,
But we're only partway through 2020.
right?
So he's projecting that for 20, he's midway through the year saying, I feel like I'm going to come in with $50,000 less billable time to ITA than what I had said last fall.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Well, you know, we don't really know honestly how this is going to play out, and I think that they're trying to keep up. My understanding is they're trying to keep up with ITA, so he's probably right because they got that authorization for video and stuff. But I guess my point that I'm struggling with here is if you've calculated something like this within like less than an FTE, it seems difficult to be a lot more precise than that, especially when you're in the middle of a health pandemic. that's kind of interrupted your projections for workflow in the court system. So I'm inclined to give some latitude here and not lose this person because chances are we'll need them.
I would agree with that. And just by way of a time check, we have 1 hour. We're just finishing number 3, and we have 35 total items.
But you've already cleared 6 other sheets, so.
So will we have more? I don't think we're going to get to all 35. I might be wrong. I hope I am. But is there another briefing set, or we can finish up the operating policy if we run short?
We do
schedule
not have another time set, but we can schedule some.
Okay, so let's just press on then, because we got a lot of meaty stuff coming.
Okay, so that was line 3. Line 4 is a slight increase in revenue of $1,270 because they are redirecting some personnel toward those cases. So that's an increase in revenue. In line 5, the estimate for the sheriff law enforcement, we're moving out of the prosecutor into the sheriff's office. The workers' compensation estimate is less than had been anticipated in the budget. And is this the one where the L&I rate went up for
I think
staff?
it's more. I think it says more.
Yeah, it's going up.
$23 more or something.
Right. So I'm asking budget staff if this is the item where L&I increased workers' comp specifically for staff who carry guns.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, and that's why it is only in the sheriff's office, and we were unaware that L&I would increase those rates. So that's why it was not built into the original budget.
Okay, I do have a question on that.
Yes?
So if it's up by about $23 per commissioned officer, it says,
Right.
I don't know if that's for corrections and line staff.
No, corrections is coming later.
Okay, so this is just for line staff, what, 100 or so? How come it's 25,000 instead of 2,500 or something? The numbers just don't seem like they add up right to me, but.
So
100
it
folks
says
that are
it's
affected.
$274 per employee,
Well,
not $23,
yeah,
274.
294 it looks like, huh?
274 additional.
I don't get that. HR had estimated 272 per month per employee. The actual is 294.78 per month per employee.
That's right.
So that doesn't add out right.
$274 per employee.
Per month, per employee, versus 272 per month per employee.
No, that's about right, because don't they have about 90 commissioned officers?
Yeah, that's assuming there's 92 officers, so that's
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's per month, so times 12. Then
Yeah, it works.
Okay,
It works.
So that's where it says 274 per year per employee.
okay.
Right.
Good enough.
Okay, that's what that is. Line number 6 is the cleaning allowance that was increased. It had been budgeted for 600, but should have been 900. So the amount in Questica was not adjusted up is the reason that it was not in. And so this was not a change in the contract this year, but it could have been a change in the contract in prior years.
They were using 2016 rates on accident instead of the newest rates.
Only for the sheriff or?
For the sheriff's cleaning allowance.
Okay.
Do other departments like Public Works, do they get cleaning allowance as well?
No, they don't.
No.
No, I
Okay,
think it's only the sheriff.
okay, I just want to make sure, I don't know if that's where Ty was going, but just, if there's other groups out there, represented groups or other employees that are using old rates, we need to get that fixed.
No, the sheriff's and corrections.
Okay,
It's my understanding that the sheriff's office would have let HR know how much to put in for this. But regardless, it's an increase that is not in the sheriff's budget at this time,
19,000, all right.
19,000. Number 7 is funding for the purchase of tasers. The sheriff's office has purchased tasers and are asking you to add approximately 33,000 to their budget to pay for the tasers.
How does this fit into our criteria for, I mean, wouldn't they have thought about that or budgeted for it? Is this an unexpected expenditure of some kind?
That would be a question for the sheriff.
I guess I would comment on this, that in light of what's going on nationally, this is a less than lethal alternative, and I kind of like it.
Less lethal or non-lethal, and they have expended their life, and I know they change every number of years and come out with better battery packs and such, and even safer models and more accurate. So are these, is this something that's, as it says, funding for purchase of, or have they been purchased and this is a reimbursement?
I believe it's the
Mike?
latter.
I'm sorry?
I believe it's the latter.
Oh, they've been purchased?
It's my understanding that they've already been purchased. We're trying to move a number of items from the sheriff's office to ER&R, but that's not happened yet. So this would have been out of the general fund.
But the, aside from that, because it is a less lethal, I have to support that. Less lethal, my gosh. Yeah, okay.
It looks like they're doing 2 a month or something, so.
Any other questions on that?
Line number 8 is funding for overtime for sheriff law enforcement. They're requesting $246,400 in overtime expenses. Line number 9 is,
Just give me a quick minute.
okay,
There's a lot to read here.
Robin, could you please move to the next page on the screen?
oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for,
Okay, I'm ready. I'm ready, Robin, thank you.
they're ready for the next item?
Yep.
All right. Line number 9 is funding for equipment and training
Hey,
for
Robin.
deputy positions. When 3 deputy positions were added to the sheriff's office, we only added salary and benefits and I think a car, but we did not put in an allowance for training and equipment. So that's a request for $49,000.
Okay.
Line number 10, the sheriff is requesting $32,790 to purchase red dot sights on pistols.
That has been purchased already, I believe.
That's what it says, yeah. 3-year phase-in approach. Okay.
Going to the next page. This is at the top of page 3, line 11. This is for juvenile court. This is another one of the items where there was funding approved at a point in time for the court to have expenditures that were covered by a grant, the aggression replacement training and function family therapy programs. They had been funded through, I think, DSHS based on a formula by the Institute for Public Policy. The state funding is being reduced statewide. Money is going down statewide, and there's a concern about losing certification as an evidence-based program. So the revenue is being decreased by about $105,000, but the court is planning to continue those programs without reimbursement.
Right.
This is another example of continuing programs where the source of revenue that was considered at the time the program was approved is now gone away. So again, I think that the board should consider a policy on whether or not you would continue to use general fund for programs where funding from other sources is gone. Line 11 is another request from the sheriff. This is for exchange of equipment with Lewis County. The sheriff would like to trade. You see the 4 items listed here. The county, Thurston County, currently owns a dive van, a communication van, a SWAT van, and a boat and trailer that the sheriff would like to trade with Lewis County to get a Freightliner communications vehicle. The cost to maintain the new vehicle is higher than the cost of these other vehicles. Some of these vehicles had been scheduled for surplus, so we lose the money that we would have gained from a surplus sale. But then the price of the communications vehicle, is higher from year to year. So they are requesting $7,000 that would be an ongoing cost, and the authority to make the trade.
Well, while everybody's thinking about that, can we go back to that juvenile evidence-based expansion grant?
Sure.
Just for a second. So if that is going to be an expenditure anyway, I guess is what I'm hearing, why can't that money come out of the treatment sales tax? Because about 90% of that juvenile activity is either drug or mental issues.
We could certainly look and see if these would be eligible costs for TST.
Because that would alleviate that pressure on the general fund.
I thought of that when we went through this just a moment ago, but looked at it as the aggression replacement training. I don't know. It's worth looking at. Don't get me wrong, but I thought of that, and I thought that's going to be, I'm not opposed to stretching, but I don't know what kind of a stretch that would be, aggression training.
I think that's if you want to put it into numbers, I think that's the numbers you're going to find are having to do with addiction, alcohol, drugs, mental health issues, that type of thing.
Well, all behavioral therapy,
Yeah, so I really think it's worth looking at. That'll help us on the general fund.
We can
Uh-huh.
certainly look into that.
Because we do have money in that fund.
okay, any questions on 12?
No.
All right, moving on to 13. The sheriff is requesting 238,000 for leave buyouts for anticipated retirements this year. They say that there will be 7 employees that retire this year, and they would be cashed out at 280 hours for vacation and 460 hours for sick leave and for any holiday leave that they may accumulate this year.
Just as a point of interest, I might mention, due to our national situation at hand, I'm gonna guess this is an underestimate. By the time, there's a lot of senior officers there that are gonna wonder if it's all worth it when it's all said and done. Just the scrutiny, nothing about right or wrong or anything else, just there's gonna be a lot of scrutiny on law enforcement. And so I'm all for doing this.
I see the vacation and leave, and we cash out sick leave?
It's my understanding that we're putting it in
deputies?
a VIBA fund.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I talked with Chief Thompson, Heidi Thompson, a couple of months ago about the all the buyouts, and Sheriff Snaza about all the buyouts coming. That's what is it, 7? The large number.
They have 7.
It's very expensive.
The current policy of the county is for offices and departments to absorb the cost of buyouts.
But do we fund them that money with which to do it?
No, they absorb it
They absorb
by
it.
holding vacancies or reducing other expenses. That's how all of our offices and departments absorb the cost of buyouts.
I want to point out, we have never funded law enforcement adequately, and I don't think we ought to keep hitting them on this. I think we need to pay attention to this issue. I think it's a societal issue as well, and I think we ought to do it. There's gonna be more load and harder recruiting coming up.
Yep. Okay. Anything on that, Ty?
No?
Okay, let's move on. Number 14.
My number 14 is a request from the sheriff for corrections of $24,000 for the workers' compensation shortfall. So this is the correction side of that L&I change. Line number 15 is a request from the prosecuting attorney. There's $150,000 reduction in general fund revenue. That is money that would normally come in from family support 4D. That is a child support that comes in from DSHS. And I'm just quickly reading this.
So this is where they would transfer the payment for the position had previously been allocated to child support, and it would be shifted to, I'm trying to look at my,
Criminal.
yeah, criminal.
Yeah. So I'm not sure why the grant is going down. I think that the state is just awarding less.
What's it got to do with central services?
Item 15.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it says central services completed the 2020 review.
I'm not sure what the connection is to central services other than the fact that they would have been using part of this grant to pay for indirect costs, possibly. Although I don't see a decrease here. So we can look and see why this grant was reduced. But, once again, this is another example where staffing and funding for the department or the office was based on certain revenue expectations, and now the revenue is gone, and the office or department wants to continue to have expenses that will impact fund balance.
Okay, 16.
All right. Change the page on the screen. And line number 16 at the top of page 4 is a request from Sheriff's Correction of $71,000 for rate increases for contractors for healthcare. Lewis County Sheriff would be for bed nights. So would Yakima County. Alternative professional services is counseling in our jail. Pack Mountain provides pre-employment workshops for inmates and our food services. The cost of all of these contracts is going up, and the sheriff is asking you to fund the increases, $71,000. Hearing nothing on that, I'll move to line 17. 21,000 for corrections, again for the tasers that have been purchased.
Robin, can I just interject? Whenever there's a line item where there's a policy in place or there's a past practice that's out of line, I'm really relying on you to let me know that. You threw the one out there about the leave buyouts kind of almost as an afterthought. I mean, that's very important to me, line item by line item. If you can identify that this is out of line with policy, out of line with the directives that you gave about what ought to be in an amendment, or out of line with just historical practice, I'd like to have that information as we go through.
Okay. All right. So thank you for that in general comment, and I'll try to remember to do that for each line. Were there any questions about line 17? In particular, the purchase of tasers. Again, this is the correction side, 21,000.
That have already been purchased.
Yes, already purchased. And then line number 18 is non-departmental. And this is a request of $86,000. And what we have here is the non-departmental transfers funding to the CPED to pay for code compliance. And the amount that's transferred, $363,875, that amount was set a few years ago and has not been adjusted for cost of living increases or other increases in expenses. What we found is that CPED is not able to fully fund 3 compliance officers with $363,000, so they are requesting an additional $86,000 to be able to fully fund the FTEs that the board has approved. One of the things I would say about this is that Josh has been actively attempting to manage this budget by leaving vacancies for vacancy savings. And those vacancies have now been taken as part of the budget reductions. So there may not be sufficient money by taking the savings in the budget for them to manage even the FTEs that are left in code compliance. But this is an item that you may want to consider as you're considering the budget reductions and where we're going with that.
I would just as soon not fund this at this point in time out of general fund. I don't see, with other potential issues coming up that we're not aware of, this would be a good opportunity not to fund this. It's not a crucial function, and I would be opposed to funding it.
Okay. And we're not making decisions today,
No.
are we?
No?
No, I know. I'm just making sure that that the people watching know we're not making decisions today. But I have that written down as well.
They
Any
just,
questions, Ty, on 18?
I'm just asking questions if I don't understand. I have plenty of comments, but I'll save them for another day. We don't have time.
Got it.
and they do
Okay.
have a vacancy that just went vacant yesterday.
Okay, 18.
All right. Flipping now, the rest of these items are not general fund items. So I am at the top of page 5, line 19. From the detention facility sales tax, this is a request from the sheriff's office to fund the workers' compensation. This is the portion that would be allocated to detention sales tax. Line number 20 is treatment sales tax. Again, workers' comp, it's the portion that would be allocated for TST for the sheriff's corrections. Line number 21 is treatment sales tax for sheriff corrections, and it is the TST allocation for the contract increases that you saw in the general fund request. Line number 22 is from the Sheriff's Special Programs Fund, also known as the Boating Fund. Sheriff is requesting $9,000 to spend on boating education and enforcement this summer. Line 23 from the Prisoners Concessions Fund, the sheriff is asking for $204 that would be allocated to prisoner concessions for the contract increases. And line number 24, also from the sheriff, is the share of workers' comp that would be charged to the Interlocal Drug Enforcement Fund. The line 25, Sheriff Law Enforcement, this is the allocation to the Interlocal Drug Enforcement Fund of the cleaning allowance. And what you see on this page is the, except for the boating fund, what you see is just based on cost allocation, wherever they have FTEs charged, a portion of their benefits would be allocated to the fund where the pay is allocated. Moving to page 6, line 26 is funding to purchase the Bearcat. So in September of 2019, the Board of County Commissioners authorized the sheriff to purchase a Bearcat. The sheriff's office put together funding from a number of sources to be able to make this purchase. One of those sources is the Interlocal Drug Enforcement Fund. So they need expenditure authority of $27,500 to be able to complete the purchase of the Bearcat. Line number 27 is also from the Interlocal Drug Enforcement Fund. There is a contract with the Washington State Patrol where the patrol spends time on the Thurston Narcotics Task Force, and the county pays for the overtime incurred by the state patrol. Again, that's coming out of the Interlocal Drug Enforcement Fund. Line 28, we're moving now to Public Works for the Long Lake Management District. This is the $56,000 to conduct additional nuisance control. We had talked to you about this contract a few weeks ago, and the board had assured that we would allow this cost so that Long Lake could conduct the treatment this year. So that's $56,000 from the Long Lake Management District. We just need additional appropriation authority. They already have the money in the bank. Line number 29 is for the General Obligation Bonds Fund. The treasurer needs appropriation authority of an additional $18,800 to make the debt payment this year. The budget had the amount from 2019 and it was not updated to reflect the amount of this year's bond payment. Line number 30 is from Public Works. It is to pay $235,000 for the stormwater retrofit study, and that money would come from the Storm and Surface Water Fund. Line 31, do I hear a question on 30?
Yes, this is a fund that has a very healthy balance. Am I right about that? I mean, is this something we need to be doing right now?
I think that this fund does have a healthy balance. Maybe Olivia could look and.
Have we looked at this before? I get some of these capital projects because we always do them in a big clump or something.
Maybe I can provide some perspective. I can provide some perspective while Olivia looks at the any fund balance. And when there was a bill introduced in the legislature this year, the county opposed related to how the Washington State Department of Transportation was given stormwater fees to counties. Well, we opposed it, but the bill passed, so we knew there was going to be an impact to the stormwater fees. This particular bill, what it did is requires every single local jurisdiction to develop a study to determine if any improvements related to the contribution of stormwater fees from state highways has a direct impact or a direct positive impact to their contributions of water, stormwater. In order for us to justify and provide that study to them, we need to invest this money. It's really about going through the process, meeting the requirements of the new law, developing the study, and we will we'll be submitting that study to DOT, and at that point is when they'll give us the stormwater fees. So it is an additional step the legislature imposed to local governments related to stormwater fees. This is not a capital project. This is a study, in my opinion, needs to be done in order for us to get stormwater fees from the state.
And fund for the stormwater fund, Fund 460, it ended at 7 million at the end of 2019, and then their capital stormwater projects facility fund, it ended at 7.1 million. So they're both very healthy.
And as far as policy, county policy, one of the acceptable reasons to come forward in a budget amendment is legislative change.
Yeah, no, I'm glad I asked the question. I mean, this is brand new. We haven't seen this at all because it's responsive to a legislative change. So I'm glad we had that.
No, and that's good eye, because yeah, you haven't seen this in the past.
Right. So those are lines 30 and 32, and I'm assuming that line 31 is related to that as well, the reduction in the revenue. So those are those three items. Then the last page, page 7, line 33 is land use and permitting. This is where if you were to approve the increase in the general fund to cover code compliance, line 33 is the revenue to the land use and permitting fund. That's where the code compliance staff are currently paid from. Then we have to transfer in the revenue because it is not a legal use to pay for code compliance from permit fees. Line 34 is the insurance risk. The risk pool has collected money in past years to pay for HIPAA costs. This year, they will actually have the costs to hire a legal expert to assist the county to establish appropriate HIPAA rules and procedures. So now they need the appropriation authority, but the money is already in the fund. Again, the insurance risk pool. And the last item on this list, line 35, this is the revenue into the ER&R fund related to the purchase of the Bearcat. And again, that revenue is coming from the interlocal drug task force fund. So now you have the bottom line.
Are we trying to get done at 3?
Go ahead, Di.
3:30?
Goes all the way to 3:30.
I want to go back to 33, which connects, I guess, back to one of the other ones.
Yeah.
Connects back to 18.
Yes, that's the right one.
18, yeah.
So in the prior discussion, I really didn't understand this second component, which says, in addition, in a prior adjustment, a project code was added incorrectly for code compliance to other non-fee eligible work conducted within CPED. This removes code compliance project code from the non-fee eligible work within CPED. I don't think I get it.
Okay, and can I add to that question? Because then if you go back to 33, Robin, you mentioned that permit fees could not be utilized for this, and I'm wondering who says so?
That's a legal opinion that we have from Travis.
Well, we don't always have to follow legal opinions, let's make sure. I think that when somebody comes in and buys a permit, I don't know why you wouldn't want your compliance officer to make sure that he did it right.
No,
So,
that's inspection, that's different than compliance.
well,
Compliance is when somebody does something outside of the code. So
okay,
when somebody pays for a permit, we have the process in place, which review the plans, issue a permit, and do the inspection. At that point, code compliance does not play a role because they have not violated the code.
well, they might have violated the permit. So there must have been a permit issued maybe at some point, maybe not.
That's when the inspector comes to play.
Well, good. I think we can take that money out of there and pay for it. I don't, so I'd like to have a second opinion on that.
Okay,
Or
by
talk with
another
Travis.
attorney?
Get Travis'
Another
opinion.
attorney?
I don't know, maybe we'll just decide not to follow it, because I think it's wrong. I'd like to have it explained to me, because I do think there's a direct nexus between those two issues that make it legal.
So we'll get to hear from Travis on that, I would imagine. Ty, you didn't get your question answered yet.
No, I didn't. So if I were to assume the legal opinion was correct, then if this doesn't get funded, then are we going to, what I'm trying to figure out is this trying to add code compliance capacity, or is this trying to maintain code compliance capacity? And if we don't fund it, we're actually going to go backwards in code compliance
That
capacity.
is correct.
Because that
The
wasn't,
latter is correct.
that wasn't clear from the previous discussion, and I would wholeheartedly, oppose us going backwards on code compliance. Which, if I've learned anything in a year and a half as commissioner, it's that we have a pretty woefully inadequate capacity. Whether it's looking at LP Brown, or the staff comes in and talks about success cases that took 20 years to finish. Clearly, we should not be going backwards. So if this item means that we're going to be going backwards if we don't fund it, then that's not acceptable to me whatsoever.
Right. So that is absolutely correct. If you don't fund this, Josh will need to shrink the effort around code compliance to live within the budget of $364,000. The narrative about the project code is a technical accounting explanation. They had so the board transfers more than this $364,000 to CPED. You also transfer an amount that's not coming to mind for activities that happen in the permit center that are also not eligible to be charged to permit fees. And again, we got a legal opinion from Travis on could we charge all the activities in the permit center to permit fees? And the answer is no. So the general fund contributes some money to CPED to cover those costs out of the general fund, and we transfer this $364,000. CPED had been using the funding that was to cover non-permit fee eligible costs to cover code compliance. We needed to get that all straightened out. And now that we have, that's why this request is coming in for the additional $86,000.
We had, I'll get you in a second, Gary. We had this discussion a few weeks ago, and the majority of my constituents that call and complain about code are complaining about quality of life within their neighborhood or within the neighbor, the immediate neighbor, whether it be noise, excessive dust, unlawful building going up not unpermitted, or someone who's taken their home out in the county and converted it into some type of an event center, and they're completely out of code, and it impacts the quality of life for the people that live in that vicinity with traffic and noise, screeching tires and such. It isn't the poor man or woman who's trying to build a house and the code compliance. Oh, you don't have the right wiring here. It's not that. It's been the other quality of life positions or complaints that I've been exposed to, and I think that was different than what you have, Gary. But you had your hand up. Go ahead, Gary.
I guess I'd just like to point out that every case that goes into every courtroom in the United States has two different opinions by two different attorneys, depending on which side of the issue you're on. And so I just don't think that is valid, that we would accept that. I think there is a nexus between those, and that's why we have attorneys, I guess. So we, at least question Travis on the why. I've got no reason to suspect otherwise, but I just don't, I don't see the disconnect.
But it seems to me, though, to answer your question, that we would need to hear from Travis. Because if he's an attorney, and
well, sure, we need to hear from Travis. Maybe somebody else, I don't know.
So I will say that the opinion from Travis is fairly recent. I want to say January.
Yeah, it's only 3 months ago.
And it could be based on a case that I'm not familiar with, I'm sure, but I'd like to know a little
Right.
more about it.
And then
Okay,
we have a similar opinion from Elizabeth from about 8 years ago. But we will certainly raise it again with the attorneys.
Didn't we lose a $16 million lawsuit a while back because one attorney said something and another attorney said something else? So let's not lock in on any one recommendation.
well, and I'm not interested in attorney shopping until I get the answer I want or the opinion I want either. We have legal advisors, they give us legal advice, and we can choose to accept it or discount it. But I want to hear from Travis and have him answer our questions.
As
That
do
way we can
I.
make
I
value
do as
judgment.
well.
Okay,
All right, so we'll set that up. Bottom line, the change in the general fund is a reduction of 303,000 in revenue and an increase in 925,000 in expenditures for a reduction in fund balance of $1.2 million. And I believe all of those are ongoing, none of it's one time. In other funds, you have a reduction in revenue of 25,000, an increase in expenditures of 565,000.
of course.
So this $1.2 million impact, if you think about the reduction exercise that we just went through, where you were trying to get reductions to a target of $5 million, you've given direction for reductions of $4 million. This would be a 1.2 increase in costs to the general fund and will increase the amount of reductions that you may have to look for by this amount. Basically another million in reductions to get to an appropriate fund balance to get through this year.
All right.
So
Are we
that's
done?
that's the list.
That's the list.
We will bring it back on, if we're gonna ask you to approve the amendments on the 16th, we should come back to you sometime next week for decisions.
Yeah, we'll organize another meeting next week for a final, at least a decision.
Well done, everybody, because I was looking at number 3, and we'd already been quite a bit deep into our 2 hours, and the timing just worked out perfectly.
Great.
So thank you for that. Gary, any final questions of the budget or the presentation?
No, not on this presentation.
Okay, Kai, any questions on this?
I'm okay.
Okay. Thank you, Robin. Romero, do you want to wrap it up? And I'm not excluding Olivia and Denise either. Thank you very much.
No, as Robin stated, we will have schedule your final decision approval on June 16th, and that will be most likely during agenda setting. The public notice has already been going out. No need to have a public hearing. That was a change from that we received last year from a legal opinion. And but we'll organize another briefing related to this next week, just to make sure that we go through line item by line item. And at that point, I will ask you to give a thumbs up or thumbs down
All right. That's next
on
week.
each item.
On each item.
Next
So in the
week.
meantime, if you have any questions or anything at all, just get a hold of me or one of the budget staff and we'll follow up.
It'll be a timing issue then to get Travis in before we go line by line.
We'll find out.
Hey, are we we scheduled until, we got another 10 minutes though, don't we?
We do.
Yeah.
Could we talk
Budget.
about, did I hear something?
I said on budget.
Yeah, well, it's on budget.
Okay.
Could we talk about the anticipated shortfall on property tax? I see that I mentioned this quickly to you maybe yesterday, Romero, on the reduction from, I don't know, 43 million, I don't have the paperwork in front of me, to 41 million or something. It was, somewhere between $1 and $2 million reduction on property tax. I don't understand that, because I don't understand the change. And you tried to explain it to me in about 30 seconds, and I was too dense to bring that in. So can we get that again? Because my seatmates might have a question about that as well. I don't know that. But I have a question about it. I don't understand why we've got a reduction in revenue from property tax. Because talking to the treasurer, he says everything is almost normal coming in, because most people, their mortgage payment, for an example, includes property tax.
So you're talking about 2019, not 2020.
Well, no, I think I'm talking about 2020.
Well, 2020, we don't know how much, because the treasurer is still, I think we've
Right, but-
not seen the property tax revenues because he closed the books on Monday.
Right, and
For the
we
first
had the
quarter.
finance committee a couple of days ago, and I don't have my notes in front of me, they're in my other office at home. But it seems to me that it was upwards of, in the 90 percentile compliance.
I thought it was more than that, to be honest, it was more than 90, I don't know how much, but.
But are you talking about 2019 or 2020?
No, I'm talking
I thought
about
you were
2020.
Because
first
2020.
That almost, it sounded like from the treasurer that we were not gonna have, nobody's gonna walk away from their house and not pay their taxes, it didn't sound like. I'm not saying nobody, but it's not
Yeah, I
gonna
wanna
be
say-
noticeable that, most folks are paying their taxes through a mortgage payment, and that payment stream has not fluctuated much. I know, what was it, due April 30th, I think, and he gave an extension of,
To June.
Until
Until just recently.
until Monday.
Yeah, but even so, even with that extension, he found that most people paid by April 30th, as
90
the, pardon?
98% sticks in my head.
There you go, I think
It's
that's
way
the
up there.
number that I remember as well. So I guess what I'm questioning is, how come we show a reduction in property tax because of this COVID thing?
I thought when you asked me the question, you were talking about the 2019 property tax levy.
Well, we had 30 seconds to get that explained.
Yeah,
How come you
that's what
didn't get
that's
that
what-
straight?
No, I thought that's what you asked me, because I never was under the impression that you were asking me for 2020, because I have
Okay.
no idea what the revenue is.
I probably did not articulate that quite right. I was kind of going back, I'm kind of talking about what Commissioner Hutchings is talking about with the 98% making their payment.
Compliance.
So I don't understand the reduction in revenue, that's all.
Well, Robin has a hand.
Yeah.
So in 2020, we budget for property tax,
Yeah.
and then we know that we budget high, because if we set the property tax levy a few months after we publish the preliminary budget, and state law says that the levy cannot exceed the amount that's published in the preliminary budget. So that is
You said
always
something
going to
about
be
that.
higher than the levy. The actual collection will always be less than we budget for the levy, always. And this is something that we talk about every year when we look at the budget. And when I show you balance sheets and it shows that the property tax is going to come in less than the budget, that's why. We always build in a buffer in the budget. Then I also had talked to you at the time we began estimating the impact of COVID. The impact of COVID-19 and the economic downturn, and what I talked to you about the impact on the property tax, we probably won't see until October, because it's going to take a little while for people to be unemployed before we start seeing
Defaults.
mortgage defaults.
Yeah.
And they've started seeing them already on the East Coast. They may never come. We may dodge that bullet, but in the Great Recession 10 years ago, we saw, again, not right at the beginning of the recession, but as we got into the recession, mortgages started to default and property tax payments went down. So that's the estimate that you see, that we may lose some property tax as the effects of the economic impact from the pandemic grind on.
But the 2020 impact is yet to be seen.
Correct.
And I thought when you asked me the question was, how is how the board sets the property tax levy rate in 2019, and obviously the actual property taxes in 2019 came lower because of what Robin has stated. Because we like to set that higher as opposed to lower, because when you said lower than the actual is an issue. Higher than the actuals is not an issue. Is that buffer to account for the fluctuation?
If we didn't set the budget high enough, we run the risk of not being able to assess the full
Right.
levy.
Right.
Okay, I
Good
mean,
question, though.
it's starting to sink in. It's just that even, do you recall, I mean, there was a difference in the recession we're facing today than the one we faced, as you referred to, the Great Recession, I guess. That was a banking and housing burst, if you will. This one is, we were healthy as could be, and then we had a self-induced gunshot wound, I guess is the best way to put it. And now hopefully we're gonna recover. And the recovery should be somewhat different, but was there a percentage of, I don't know, defaults on mortgages or something that occurred in, back in that 10-year period that we could refer to as maybe an example? Do you remember? I mean, did 5% lose their house? Or there was a lot of inflated price activity involved in those mortgages that people lost because everybody ended up underwater. And I'm not seeing that underwater component in this recession. So I'm just wondering, you said in October we might see it, and I don't know if we will or not. I hope we don't.
I hope we don't too. I really hope we don't, but it's going to take a little while for that impact to hit tax payments, and it did then too. We could certainly ask the treasurer or the assessor if they have any information on mortgage defaults. We can do a little research on that from 2008 and 2009. You're absolutely correct. The reason that we went into that recession was the housing bubble burst, and there had been loans made that were perhaps not ethical on behalf of the banks. What I'm looking for, what we do know right now, is that the property tax revenue comes in anywhere from usually lately it's been running around 99% of the anticipated collections. And in the recession, I think it came in at a 97%. It dropped a few percentage points in the actual payments to the county. So we have that number. I've been using that number in the model as we compare this recession, since we really don't have data yet, to the recession from 10 years ago. And that's what I'd need to, we can do some research and give you more information, but we always budget high.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Robin, and your band of renown. Thank you very kindly. Seatmates, thank you. Romero, any final thoughts?
Nope,
We're done?
thank you.
All right. Thank you all, and we're adjourned.
All right.
Bye-bye.
And thanks for the snacks.